All right, so thank you everyone for joining today in today's workshop. Today we're going to cover how to set up an HTML page, how to connect some JavaScript to that page, and we'll touch on some JavaScript concepts if time permits. So let's go ahead and begin. So how I start every project is I create my project folder. Oops, I created two of them. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this May 15th, and I'll call it workshop. And I have created my folder, so now I'm going to go ahead and open that with my text editor, Visual Studio Code. And let me move my face because I know it's in the way. And now I'm going to go ahead and create first my index.html file. So I click that icon with the file, index.html. And then next thing I need to do is have my HTML skeleton, which is required for any HTML document. So with Visual Studio Code, I can just type in HTML, select the version I want, which is going to be 5, which is that third one on the menu. I hit enter, or you can click with your mouse. And here we have the skeleton, and I'm going to go ahead and change my title to May 15th. So before I jump into writing code, let's examine the skeleton here. So we start off with this tag right here. Notice there's no closing and no closing tag. This is just to letting us know that the document type is an HTML document. So we're just letting it know it's an HTML document. Then we have our HTML tags, which is saying, hey, this is the actual HTML document that we specified earlier. This attribute lang, it says it's in English. And then within this HTML document, within these opening and closing tags, we have two nested elements in there. The first one is our head element, and the second one is our body element. Inside of our head element, that's where you're going to see all these meta tags, title tags, link tags. Everything that's inside of your head element is not seen on the browser. It's just information to either interpret or use when rendering to the browser or interacting with the internet, right? So you could have meta tags that have keywords in it, and that takes into factor in Google algorithms when they're doing searches and things of that nature. You also see your link tags, which you're linking your CSS files, or maybe a content delivery network that imports some information, like Bootstrap, for example. You're also going to see your title, and that's the title of the actual document. So everything inside of the head element is not actually seen by the user, right? It's kind of like background information. So that is not to be confused with your other elements, header or heading, which I will touch on. Then we have our body element, which is still nested inside of our HTML, but it's outside of the head. So those are two separate elements inside of the HTML. This is where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. Anything that you want to be seen on the browser is going to be written inside of the body. So here, this is where you're going to write most of your code. So we can start off with a header. And header is the top part of the document. So just like when you're writing a document in Word, for example, if you're writing a paper, you have a header and you have a footer. So kind of same situation here. We have a header, and inside of our header is usually where you're going to find your navigation. And that's going to be where you're navigating to different parts of the actual page, or maybe you're navigating throughout the site and you're going to different pages. For example, if you're on Amazon.com, for example, you might click on something that takes you to the Kindle books, for example, and there's some sort of navigation there that led you to that point. So normally what you'll see inside of your header is nav, and that is indicating that this is going to be the navigation bar. And inside of that, you'll have maybe some anchor tags, and we have our opening tag with our attribute href, and we have closing our opening tag, and we have our closing tag. Now in here in href is where you want to set something equal to something so it can navigate to that place. So for example, if let's say I had a contact page, I could go contact.html, and then in between the opening and closing anchor tag, I would have what I want to be clickable. That could be text, that could be an image, it could be multiple things, it could be a button, it could be basically any element that you can write in HTML. You can put it inside of anchor tag, and now that element is clickable, and once it's clicked, it will take you to wherever href is located. So for example, if I wanted it to be text, I could do contact, okay? But in order for this to work, I actually need to have a contact.html file, so I could easily create one of those by clicking the file icon and creating a contact.html. And let me just write something real quick here. I'll just say contact page. Let's go back here. Oh, I'm looking at it. There we go. All right, so there we have our header, we have a navigation, and we have an anchor tag. Are there any questions on any of the HTML I've covered so far? How I wrote it, what the tags actually mean, where the placement of the tags, anything of that nature, or anything that you just have on your mind about HTML?
I have a question. So say if you had another, like under the href contact, say you had another, you wanted to put like another info. So you just write it right above it. You don't have to put another nav.
Right, so you only have one nav because you're only dealing with one navigation bar, right? So inside of that navigation bar, you're going to have multiple links that can link you to different places. So we only have one navigation, so we can put everything in here. So if I had, like, let's say 5, right, but 5 different pages, I can just go ahead and paste this 5 times, and then I can change this to whatever. I mean, let's say we had an info.html. I wanted this to be info, or we had an about page. I have about here. Maybe we have an online store, and I can do that. So we have multiple links inside of one navigation. So you can kind of see how many of each you would need.
Yeah, okay.
That makes sense? Clear things up? All right. Okay, so any other questions before I move on? All right, so we'll keep on trucking here. And let's go ahead and, so let's pretend we are working on a website here, and I'm just gonna shift some things around so it kind of looks like a real site. Let's say, what kind of website do you guys wanna build for what type of business? All right, let's pretend that we are building a musician's website, okay? So we're gonna have a navigation, info. Let's do, instead of contact, let's have about the artist, and then we can have an events page. Let's say events.html, and we have about, events, and shop. And let's go ahead and create those files now. I don't need this contact page anymore. And let's say we have events, index.html, and I'm just going to put some text in there. And let's create, what's the other one we had? Shop. So we'll have shop.html, create that. And the about will be the actual index.html page. All right. So there we have our navigation. And now I'm going to go ahead and let's say we want a little banner that says welcome to the artist page or something like that, or just as the artist name. So I'm going to go ahead and create a div. And inside of that div, I will have an H1 tag because I want a big heading. So H1 is going to be the heading that is the biggest and widest, is of the most importance. So here, let's say the artist name, let's see, what artist? Let's do Janet Jackson here. We'll have Janet Jackson, and then maybe we have, let's say, an image of her. Right? So we'll have an image tag with a source attribute. And let's just take an image of her from offline. We'll do Janet Jackson. Hopefully is not the Super Bowl photos. Let's see, got some Janet here. Got some classic Janet. So we are going to copy image address here. I'm going to go ahead and put this here. Then we have, let's say we have another section that is about Janet. So I'm just going to create another div. I'll have an H3 tag that says about Janet. And then maybe I want to go ahead and put a paragraph under there. I'm going to steal some dummy text here. So Lorem Ipsum. Lorem Ipsum is basically Latin, and it's used by a lot of developers just for placement of text, just to kind of have that hold there. So I'm going to go ahead and generate some. And then I will just copy all this text right here. Just copy. Then I'm just going to paste it in between my paragraph tag. I'm going to word wrap. Ooh, that is a long image link. Okay, so we have a paragraph there. And then let's say lastly, we want to have a sign up newsletter type thing here. So I'm going to go ahead and create another div, and I'll do another H3 tag, and I'll say sign up for the newsletter. And let's say we have a form. So I'm going to do a form tag. And then in there, I'm going to have some, I'm going to have a label for my inputs. So we'll have the label tag, and this is where you write the label for the field that you wanted to do. So let's say we have first name, and then nested inside of that, we're going to have an input tag, and we're going to have a couple attributes for this input tag. So we'll have type, it's going to be text, and then I'm going to have an ID for it. I'm going to call it first, and then I want to put a placeholder in there. So we'll say IE Michael, and we'll close our input tag. So here, if we look at our form, we have our label, and then we have our input with that. So I'm going to make a couple more of these for some different inputs. And I'm just going to change some things here. I'm going to change the label, and I'm going to change the ID, and I'm going to change the placeholder. And let's say I wanted one more piece of information, like email. So I will write email. Type is going to be email. The ID is going to be email. And do a different placeholder. And then normally with a form like this, I'm not going to show you actually how to make a sign up form work because that's a whole nother lecture. But normally you would have like an action attribute here and a method attribute. And what those two do, basically it sends the information to a particular place and then it tells it what to do with that information. So usually there's a server involved and a script involved that tells what to do with that information. So in this particular case, we would have some script that puts this information in a database or on a list server. So when an email gets sent out, it gets sent out to everybody. But that's kind of outside of the scope of this workshop, but just in case you were wondering. And usually there is another input that has submit. So normally it would look something like this, type equals submit, and then we have value equals, and whatever value equals, it's going to be what actually shows up on that button. So let's say we have sign up. And then let's go ahead and open this, see what we are working with so far. So this is kind of the page that we are working with right now, right? We have a navigation, we have an image of Janet with her name, a little bit about her, and then a sign up form for the newsletter with a sign up button, okay? So let's say we want to incorporate some JavaScript into this. We wanted to do something with this form, or maybe we wanted to change something on the page when a button's clicked. So before I jump into JavaScript, are there any questions on the HTML that I wrote? All right.
I got a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Last time. So say on the form, say you don't put the label on, because I've seen some examples without the label.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? You don't have the label on the form. What is that?
So what that looks like, okay, let's say I took these labels off, right? So I'll just take it off the first one so you can see. I have a placeholder for this input type. So what will appear is just the box with my placeholder. Now, if I didn't have a placeholder in there, I would just have an input box like that, which isn't exactly user-friendly because the user doesn't know what they're supposed to be putting in that box.
Okay, awesome, perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm, no problem. We'll put those back. Any other questions? All right, we'll jump into JavaScript then. So if I wanted to incorporate some JavaScript into my HTML page, I can easily do that. First thing I need to do is I need to create that JavaScript file. So I'm going to create a file here, script.js. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put that script into my HTML. So I'm going to do a script tag. And I'm using an external JavaScript. So normally I could do a script tag and then I could write some JavaScript in between here. I could write JavaScript code and that would be, but since that gets a little bit messy and it's hard to follow, what we do is we use an external file that we import into our HTML and we link it together. So similar to what we do in CSS when we use an external style sheet, we're doing the same thing with JavaScript. So in my opening tag, I'll put source, and then I'll let it know where it's at. So it's in my project directory directly. So I'm going to go ahead and put the file name script.js. I save that. So now these two are linked together. So whatever JavaScript I write here will now work with my HTML. So let's say randomly, I want to create a button that when I click it, it says, Janet says hi or something silly. So I'm going to create a button tag here. And then on my button, I'm going to say, click here to say hi to Janet. Okay, that's going to be my button. And then under my button, I'm going to have a tag here where the message appears. So I want it to be an H1. I want it to be big. And I'm going to give it an ID of Janet response. And then I'm going to go ahead and add an attribute to my button. So I'm going to give it the onClick attribute. And I'm going to set it equal to a function that I have in my JavaScript. So I'm going to call it Janet Hi. Okay, so that means in my JavaScript, I need to have a function called Janet Hi. And what I need that function to do is spit out a message to this element saying her message, right? So I'm going to go ahead and split the screen here so we can look at both bits of code. And move the JavaScript over here and index here. Okay, so here we are working with a function called Janet Hi. So function Janet Hi. So we're telling it, hey, it's a function. The function name is Janet Hi. It has 0 parameters, so we have parentheses with nothing in them. And then we have our curly brackets, which is where I want the executable code to go. So here, all I want to do is I want to write a little message in this element. So I'm going to first grab that element by document get element by ID. And the ID is Janet response. And I'm going to grab the inner HTML of this element. So inner HTML is going to be basically anything that's inside of an opening and closing tag. So in this particular situation, there's nothing in between there. So I am grabbing that space and I am setting it equal to something. I want it to be equal to a particular message or a particular value. So here I wanted to say, what did she say? Miss Jackson, if you're nasty. Famous Janet quote there. And we'll save that. So now these two should be able to interact and I should be able to click this button and get that message. So we'll go ahead and refresh. And I'll click here to say hi to Janet. And then we get this message. Okay. So that's how we can kind of interact the two together. Are there any questions on anything I've gone over? All right, well, if there are 0 questions, I would like to thank you for coming to the workshop today. If you do have any questions that come to you later, go ahead and feel free to send me a message. If you need to rewatch this workshop to kind of get a deeper absorption level, it is recorded and will be posted by the end of the day. Under your announcements, there is a workshop section, and under that, there's a little message that says, click here for recorded workshops. You will find this workshop there along with older workshops that you are welcome to watch and kind of get a full picture of different material as each workshop kind of covers a different topic and different examples. So I am going to open the floor up one more time for any last minute questions before I head and close the room. All right. Well, I do want to thank you guys for coming today and joining the workshop. So again, if you have any other questions, feel free. Oh, I do see a chat here box. There are some message questions. So let me take a look here. All right. There was a question of having Windows and if using Apple, if there's a difference in Apples and Windows. As far as Visual Studio Code, it will look pretty much the same because it's compatible cross-platform. So there shouldn't be any issues with what I've done today as far as Apple and Windows. The commands that I use as far as like shortcuts on my keyboard of copy and paste, that's going to be a little bit different, but it's not going to affect your code. But thank you again for coming, and I wish you all a great day.